Akilah Jeffery, aka A.A. Jeffery, aka Dr. Jeffery, aka Miss Jeffery. That's right, this teacher has worn and still wears a couple of hats. She is an Oakland, California native who was raised in a family of educators. Growing up, she remembers being in her parents' classrooms, even sometimes helping out with setting up lessons and organizing graded work. Even during her undergrad at UC Berkeley, she continued to work in K-6 classrooms as a classroom aide. She also eventually took part-time work as a substitute teacher. But when it came time to choose a career, she wanted to pursue something outside of what she considered her parents' interests. So she went back to school to become a lawyer. Originally believing she would pursue a concentration in music law, she attended Vanderbilt University and found herself immersed in a vivacious music scene. Did I forget to mention that Miss Jeffery is also a bit of a musician herself? She strongly believes that art and music education had an enormous impact on her success growing up. Having gotten her music fix in Nashville, she finished law school and moved to Seattle, where she found herself working in immigration law instead. She found working with immigrant families meaningful and necessary, but also mentally and emotionally exhausting. In her spare time, which she had very little of, she volunteered in a middle school social studies class, and she realized that she may have been wrong about her place in education. It wasn't that education in general wasn't her thing, but that she had limited her experiences to the elementary classroom. Being a single subject classroom was a whole different vibe. She came home to Oakland and pursued a single subject credential in social studies and found a job as a middle school social studies teacher at American Indian Public Charter. She loved her job, and she even won Teacher of the Year in her first year at that school. Skyrocketing housing costs caused Miss Jeffery to leave living in the Bay Area and ultimately her job at American Indian, and that is how she has ended up here in Stockton. She has been working at Lincoln High School ever since her move and still loves her job, although she misses her former school and the city that raised her. She also teaches law classes in the afternoon at San Joaquin Delta College and has recently written a middle school fantasy novel under the pen name A.A. Jeffery. Will De Silva's Secret Keeper is a fun, illustrated middle-grade novel fantasy about a girl who moves to the Pacific Northwest and finds herself in the midst of a power struggle between fairy courts. The character Will De Silva was inspired by fellow teacher Jillian Gravel, who one day lamented to Miss Jeffery about being stereotyped as a wild child for having bright red hair. Hi, Jillian. We'd love to have you on the show. Miss Jeffery's website, www.wildesilva.com, is coming soon with more information about publishing dates and where you can get your copy. Please remember to leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you use to help us gain more visibility for these amazing teachers like Miss Jeffery to a wider audience. And now we give you Miss Akilah Jeffery in her own words. Thanks for listening.
All right.
And we can just continue talking. So we have Akilah Jeffery, Esquire, here with us. And you are a teacher who works with me at the same school site.
Yes,
you teach.
I am.
You teach social studies. You've published a book. You used to be a lawyer. We want to know all the things.
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of my journey. The book is about to be released this fall.
You got a sneak peek.
But it's like in the printing process. So that's where I am on it. But another lawyer turned teacher.
Do you know other lawyers turned teacher?
Oh, pardon?
Do you know other lawyers turned teacher?
Well, I don't know anybody's. Actually, I don't know anyone, but I have heard a lot about lawyers doing it, and I do know a couple of lawyers who have transitioned into teaching at the college level, which I do too. So I teach high school, and I also teach at the community college.
That's right. We did talk about that before. You're teaching at the San Joaquin Delta College, which comes up a lot in our interviews because I interview Stockton teachers, and it's super awesome that you're out there educating all the Stocktonians.
Yes. Yeah, I literally have taught kindergarten through college.
What?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be a 3-hour interview. There's so many things you can tell us.
That's right.
Each stage of development.
Oh my God.
Well, let's talk about your book a little bit since we kind of started with that. So what's the title of your book? Is it your first book? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, this is my first book. So the title is Wilda Silva, Secret Keeper.
Yes.
And it's my first novel. So I have written before in the past, but this is the first book and the first novel.
Yeah, and we got a little sneak peek, and it's very much for middle school age students. It has that tone to it.
Well, the protagonist is 11 years old, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
It's a young protagonist. Yes. Has a pretty relatable, I guess it would be relatable, home life.
I know about, I related immediately to the moving.
Yeah.
I knew about the moving.
Okay.
That's my life, my whole life.
And it has that fantasy element to it as well. And she's a redhead. That really stands out right away.
The thing that stood out right away to me was there was a map in the very beginning.
Oh yeah, there was. I did.
And I was like, yes.
Your illustrator.
This is going to be good.
Your illustrator is very talented. I was kind of admiring the artwork at first, the cover and then the map.
Yeah.
And even the little chapter, I don't know what you call those, but there's little mushrooms around chapter 1. I was like, oh my gosh, these are the cutest mushrooms. Like, it's just very beautiful artwork. So kudos to your illustrator as well.
So how does one even begin? Just give us a little bit about that, because I'm really curious. Where did you start with the writing, and how did this develop?
Well, I have written before, and just kind of as a hobby, and always kids stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, I guess, because I've been teaching for a while. That's kind of like the type of story that I enjoy, and that I like to create. I like to share that kind of a kid's story. And so, having been around a lot of stories, reading a lot of stories, spending a lot of time, going through the text and libraries and things like that, I just kind of I always wanted to write my own. And even when I was a little kid, I used to write funny stories. I remember writing a story about a dog that I called Sweet Tarts because that was my favorite candy. So, even then, so it's just what came out. And so when I was writing this, I started the writing process back in November of 2018.
Okay.
Wow.
And when I started writing this, I actually didn't think I was going to write a kid's story. I was like, I'm going to be a serious author, and I want to write a suspense thriller.
Huh.
And, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to, crank out something really suspenseful and maybe even a little bit scary. And as I started writing, I thought, well, no, that's kind of, that's not really what I want to do. I guess I should just go ahead and write what comes naturally. And so, this is the story that came out.
Wow.
And it was a middle school fantasy. And as I started writing, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go with it.
Wow. So did you have, you feel like when you were young, were you reading a lot of fantasy, or were you reading a lot more suspense thrillers, or is there your experience reading at a younger age that sort of inspired you to write this?
I think so. I had I used to enjoy books that had characters that were more relatable,
Mm-hmm.
and fantastic types of things that happen, things that you wouldn't typically find in your everyday life. Mm-hmm. That you had to go to a book, you had to go to a movie to experience that. So movies like E.T.
Mm-hmm.
And stories like Where the Wild Things Are.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's kind of where my head was when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always liked those really fantastic things. But at the same time, I always liked characters that were more relatable. So a lot of the stories that were popular at the time with other kids my age back then, I didn't tend to go for that. I didn't tend to go for the sort of normal drama kind of, the kids in high school, the Sweet Valley High type books that were super popular.
Right.
That was not really my thing. I would go for the Choose Your Adventure books.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, I was just more into those kinds of, a little bit more fanciful type stories. So yeah, I think that was just always the thing for me.
So any particular series that that come to mind, or?
Yeah, well, there was one series that, and this is not fanciful at all, but it did take me to another place and another time, and that was the Anne of Green Gables series.
Wow.
So I used to really enjoy that, and she was a redheaded girl. So I did really enjoy that because it took me to a different time, different century, totally different era. So yeah, that growing up was really something I was really into. And then as I got a little bit older, I had a fascination with Agatha Christie.
Oh, cool.
So I used to really I got into those mysteries, but that also was different time, different places, and the venues were fantastic, even though it wasn't a fantasy genre, but the idea of people riding on a train, a murder taking place on a train. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody if you haven't read it, but you should read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about Murder on the Orient Express. Yeah, I like those kinds of stories.
I actually had some kids read that a few years ago, and there was like a little debate going because some kids didn't like it and some kids did like it. I thought that was interesting that they were debating this book. I don't think, because was a movie made? I think there was a movie.
Yes.
That's what they were arguing, whether the movie did the book justice or not. They were having a little argument about that.
Yeah, it seems like there's a new movie made about Murder on the Orient Express just about every 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And the books are from their time period. The author was from her time period. And so, yeah, she was part of that era. But I still think the stories themselves are, the mysteries are really interesting still.
I used to love Agatha Christie in middle school. I had my English teacher in middle school had like the whole shebang. Like they were all over her room, and when we did SSR, it was just, we were just all of us, I feel like, clocking through all of our Agatha Christie's, as many as we could before the year ended.
Yeah. And then the other thing I have to mention is Neverending Story.
Oh yes, of course.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
We got my daughter actually, I don't remember why this was. She's reading quite a bit. So she's been reading all the Harry Potter. Well, she finished all the Harry Potters like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And around the same time, I introduced her to Encyclopedia Brown, because that was my favorite little mystery book that I liked when I was a kid, her age. But they were way too easy for her. So now I'm like, okay, let's see if we can transition to some more difficult stuff like Agatha Christie. But we haven't yet gotten there. But I think that's the next step. For sure.
Okay, well maybe Nancy Drew.
Somewhere. Yeah, well, Nancy Drew.
I think she'd like Nancy Drew. I had gotten her the Chronicles of Narnia. Actually, I had gotten it pretty early. She was like 4, but she started reading at 4, and she actually, so she couldn't read it, but she sat through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe with me. I think it took us a week. And every night she was like, go ahead and read it. And I would read it, and she would sit and she would listen. And then I started asking her like the second night, like if she understood, and she did. So we read it together for like a week. And then she started trying to read it maybe at about 6 or 7. And then she stopped at the second book, and then she tried again maybe 2 years later, and I think she just doesn't like it. Like, I just think, because she just never makes it past book 2. And so I was like, well, but I got her the whole set. I found it, I think, at like a
She'll
vintage
come back
store or
around
something.
to it.
Yeah.
Things kind of change over time.
Well, I think the dedication in that, in the Chronicles of Narnia, I think he dedicated that first book to his goddaughter, who I think he said in the dedication, it took me so long to write this that basically now you're an adult by the time.
Oh, that's right. No, that's true. I do
You're an
remember
adult.
that. They do change over time.
Yeah. And I think he said something like, by the time you get around to reading this, I'll be an old man. And, it's just a really funny dedication.
But I think because it took so long to write, I mean, the series, there's such a distinct difference from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then because I think I've actually only made it to book 5. I didn't read it as a kid, so when I bought it for her, I was pushing through them, and I don't think I made it past book 5 because I also kind of lost interest. It's like the first one is so exciting, and then it just gets I don't know what happens in the middle of the series, but it lost me at 36. So
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was a kid reading The Hobbit, and I think over time writing styles change, the audience changes. So for me, I had heard a lot about The Hobbit. It was really talked up as, this is a great story. But when I was reading it, for me at that age, it seemed maybe a little slower than what I was used to.
Definitely slow, yeah.
Yeah. But now, listening to The Hobbit, listening to the audios, it's like, wow, it's really interesting and detailed.
Yeah. It's really dense, like how much stuff they pack into each page, and the language that they're using, it really allows for that. Yeah, I noticed that.
So you get older and you appreciate it a little more.
That's definitely true. And I do think I do feel for me sometimes the opposite happens. Like I never read The Catcher in the Rye until I actually had to teach it. I remember my cousin actually really liked that book, and she wasn't really a reader. She's still really not a reader, but it was like the one book she was like, I love that book. And then I read it as an adult, and I was like, I don't love this book. But all my students were like, this is the best book ever. So sometimes that happens. I feel like it's when you meet adults who've never watched The Wizard of Oz, it's like it's not going to hit you the same if you haven't watched it as a kid.
Yeah. And I felt the same way you feel about The Catcher in the Rye when I read it as a kid.
Oh, really?
And I think just maybe my personality was just different. I could not relate to him at all.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and feeling angry with the protagonist. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I wanted to shake him.
Yeah, he's pretty annoying.
I think nowadays nobody has time for that.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I actually started looking into J.D. Salinger's like mental health because it kind of sounded like he may have like what's the main character? Holden. Yeah. I was like, does he have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia? Like, what's going on with him? And it actually got me more curious about J.D. Salinger than about actually Holden Caulfield. I could have cared less about him. I was like, what's going on with J.D.? And then I kind of learned he was kind of a recluse and a little, people felt he was a little bit odd. So I was like, okay. I think we got a little insight into his mind with this book.
Probably would make an interesting biopic.
Yes, I think so. I definitely think so.
Who's going to play you in yours?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eye out for you, okay?
Okay.
Start casting.
But now my mind is going, and I was actually thinking, who would play me?
Who would play you, see? That's a good question. Rihanna. Just play
Oh. There you go. I was actually thinking of maybe Viola Davis.
See, you already have it in mind. Let's do this. Contact her. Let's do this. It's awesome. So 2018, roughly. This is when you started the process of writing this story. Your debut novel. And I'm curious, what was the trigger? What made you say, you know what? Now's the time. This is it. Was it just the idea? It just took over?
You know what? This is going to sound really weird.
This is what I love. I want to hear it.
Sound really off the wall and like, wait, what?
Okay.
It's almost like what do they call it? A Rube Goldberg machine, where you start off with a little marble.
Yeah, one thing hits
and
another thing.
It hits a
Yep.
deck of cards, and the
Yep.
deck of cards hits something else, and then something. Well, I think that it started with me just, I needed something fun to do. I was working hard, and I, decided, well, most of the shows on TV I'm not that into, but there was this one show that I watched all the time, and I became a fan, called The Orville. And it's a show that used to come on Fox. And so I used to watch this show, and then it just kind of reminded me of how much I like that kind of thing, sci-fi and fantasy.
What's it called?
The Orville.
I think I heard of it.
What is it about?
It's about it's kind of like Star Trek in a way.
Okay.
Like the original kind of Star Trek Enterprise.
Yes.
It's about this the space flight crew, and I guess they're kind of military exploratory crew traveling the universe, getting into all kinds of adventures.
Now I want to watch it.
It's fun. It's actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but
I just Googled it, and Seth MacFarlane's in it, so I gotta watch it now.
Yeah. And so it just reminded me, because I hadn't seen something fantastical in a really long time, especially on television. I hadn't seen something like that in a while, and it really, really reminded me of how much I enjoy just the essence of storytelling and where it can take you in all kinds of new environments. Mm-hmm. And after, being reminded of that, and I felt like, I should start writing some stories. Maybe because the show went on hiatus and I needed something to do, and I'm missing my fantasy fix.
Wow.
So then I ended up having to create something myself. Maybe that's
And then,
it.
I guess what's interesting to me too is that you kept going with it, because I feel like maybe you get that sudden that sudden fleeting feeling of doing something great, and I can imagine, I can relate to that, but being able to just carry it forward and be persistent about it, and I'm assuming that you had to at some point make a choice to commit, to really commit. And when would you say that was? Chapter 2? How did you feel like you committed to it?
Well, they say there's two kinds of writers. There's planners and pantsers. And the planners plan everything out and then sit down and start writing, and the pantsers just write by the seat of their pants and where they land. So I was really a pantser. I started writing, and it was just wherever it takes me. And I think by the time I got to the second chapter, and I just had this idea: if I write 2 chapters and it's horrible, it's terrible, it's an embarrassment, I'll stop. So, but once I got to the end of the second chapter, I started thinking, you know what, this might go somewhere. Maybe I should continue. And then I started to freak out, these stories have been told before, fantasy kind of things, and this is a story that has a portal. And I've heard people say, publishers don't want stories with portals anymore. Don't write a portal. And I started thinking, well, it's fantasy, and there's already been a ton of fantasy books. And my brother said, and I was telling him, I think I'm, maybe I need to stop. And my brother said, no, just keep going, keep writing. Oh, cool. You got to finish. You got to keep going.
So he was sort of did he read your drafts and stuff? Was he helping you? Were you kind of bouncing ideas off him?
Actually, he hadn't read anything. I bounced a couple of ideas off of him, and I told him, well, I'm planning to do this. I have this in the story, I have that. And I'm concerned because, there's another story out there that has fairies, and there's another story that has a dryad, and what if people are burned out on dryads, and you're just like, you know what, just write your story, just write it, just write. And you you can always go back and edit later, but keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, at which point did you feel like, okay, now it's actually time to contact a, an editor or something? Or like, how did you? What's the next step?
Yeah. So, so when I finished the book, at first I was really nervous because I had never finished a novel before, and I had started out before in little fits, starting out, I'm going to write, and then I only got to like page 50. So this time I actually finished.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, let me just send it out there and see what happens, because I was really nervous. And I sent it out to a bunch of literary agents, and I got a bunch of rejection notices back. And I started to freak out a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And so then I sent it to a couple of people close to me to take a look at it. And they said it's good, it's good. But then I thought, well, if they're family or friends, of course they're going to tell me. But nobody's going to say, oh, it's terrible, you should quit, because they want to be supportive. So then I sent it to an editor to have it have typos and things, called like copy editor.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I can't send something out to publishers if it's got a lot of errors, because then they won't take it seriously. They're going to say amateur.
Right.
And the copywriter got back to me, and I had already paid her. And so she was like, okay, well, here's your work. And she got paid. And she was like, by the way, this is really, really good.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. And she said, no, really, you got to keep sending this. You got to keep sending it to publishers, because somebody's going to pick it up sooner or later. Keep trying. And I felt like, well, maybe it is actually pretty good. I don't know. But then she was adamant. She's like, please send it. Like, please.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, okay.
How awesome is that? You got a champion for you.
That's
right
really
there.
awesome that you were able to get that boost of encouragement to keep moving forward.
Yeah, but I decided, and I haven't really. I thought about going with a traditional publisher, but I have not totally committed to that. So, if there is a traditional publisher out there who's interested, maybe I'll consider it. But yeah, I think there could be maybe something like that in my future, but I don't know yet. I do want to get out there though, so I'm just gonna go forward with it.
Well, what are the considerations that you're having between making that decision and not?
Well, one of the things is it's the first in a series. So it's book 1. So any publisher that I would work with I would want a guarantee that it can be a series. I don't want it to be just the one book. So yeah, that's my thinking. It's kind of a big deal for me.
So trying to make sure that it's not that it reaches its potential rather than to be cut short or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So this is you mentioned briefly now. This is something I'm really interested in too, though. So you've had previous attempts, and when and how did those develop and then fall off?
Well, you know what? This being my first novel, I was a total novice when it came to like writing a query letter and getting an agent to be interested in. I didn't know how to write things like that. There's difference between writing a novel, creating a fiction, and creating your marketing. And when it comes to creating the marketing, I was just like clueless. I didn't know how to write an engaging email that would make someone want to keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had to learn that then.
Yeah. And as an independent author, you kind of you have to learn all of these things. and just starting out, in order to get a literary agent to look at your work, you do have to understand a certain level of marketing. Yeah, so that's a big part of it.
What helped you most to develop those skills then? Like, what were you doing to improve that?
Well, I think it's trial and error. I think it's a trial and error situation.
Wow.
You just keep going, just keep throwing it out there. Just keep hitting the wall with the spaghetti.
Oh man.
And you know, I'm still throwing the spaghetti. I'm still trying to figure out what works. I will have a book trailer coming out next month. My plan is for that to be ready next month with the book trailer, and I'm working with an animator on that. So,
Wow.
I mean, we'll see.
That's pretty cool.
We'll see. Thank you.
It's very exciting. I can't even. Yeah, there's so many more questions, but maybe we should talk about teaching as well at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Well,
this
you know,
is.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's always awesome to have a teacher who's actually invested in work, especially writing. I think like we even in the English department, it's come up sometimes in conversations I've had with my colleagues, like as English teachers, like what are we writing? Like you can't, if we're teaching English, we should also be invested in English. We should be reading, we should be writing. And so and I feel like I've always felt that social studies and English are so closely related. Like we have very similar lives, and when it comes to the kind of grading we have to do and the kind of things we ask of our students with these defending their perceptions of things and all of that. So it's still kind of a teaching thing, because now your students will know my teacher is also a writer and she lives what she teaches, right? You're doing this as part of your actual daily life as well, or at least your home life. So, yeah.
I think teachers are in a great position to be writers, because you get a lot of insight into how people read and how they learn and how they process imagery and all those kinds of things that can inform your writing.
Absolutely, especially if you're targeting the age group that you teach. You're kind of have a focus group already every day.
Yeah.
You get to work with.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a lot of social studies that went into the book, even though it's a fantasy.
I bet, yeah. I was just thinking that.
You know, it's like a modern day fantasy, but I did a ton of research into all kinds of fairy lore.
Wow.
And just to get it right, you know.
Yeah.
So, and there's fairy lore from all over the world that I researched, and I was able to discover that although Irish fairy lore is what most people think of and what most people might be familiar with in maybe here in the U.S., but there's fairy lore from all over the world. There's you know, in Asia, and in Africa, in Australia, they didn't necessarily call them fairies, but the idea of sort of magical creatures, or even like magical animals, is there. And so I really enjoyed the research and being able to try and make it as accurate as possible.
I feel like the research is sometimes the most exciting part in anything. I love learning about different cultures or how things came to be. I always try to share things with my students that I know about, like the history behind something. Like we're doing poetry right now, so sometimes I'll be like, you know, like we used to use poetry to memorize stories because we didn't have written language. And like I'm always like, you know, like, and that's kind of a basic one I feel like most people know, but like I think that's always the best part of anything we do, whether as a teacher or if you're a writer or something, is like just learning about the new stuff. And the cool thing is, especially with you, like taking the time to kind of expand, because there are some serious fairy lore experts, I guess you can call them. Like they take that seriously, and it is usually like the Irish fairy lore that they really are all about. So to like expand it and be like, well, let's talk about the other ways fairies existed in other cultures. let's acknowledge that, like, it's worthy of being represented. Like, that makes it even more exciting. And we're in a time now where Gen Z wants to know all of it. They want it. They don't want to just know the cookie cutter, generally white, history on things or whatever. They want to know, like, well, how does it exist in Asia? How does it exist in the Middle East? How does it exist in these other places? So it's super exciting.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I enjoyed discovering a lot of it, but yeah, I think you're right. I think this generation wants the full story. They want to know it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that was fun, and being able to incorporate just different kinds of stories and just have more representation
Mm-hmm.
in the book. I felt like it was more reflective of the society that my audience is living in.
Yeah.
So it was important for me to have that.
Absolutely.
What I really think is interesting too is the depth that you can get by using real references, I guess, and incorporating research and then putting that research into the story. Because I have a friend who, when we were growing up, he was the one who was always telling me about a new fantasy novel that he wanted me to read about. And one day I was just like, how do you find these? And then he broke it down to me. He was like, well, the best ones are the ones that have the best magic systems. As he said, he calls it. And I was like, magic system, huh? And that like really, I remember, I don't know why that conversation just struck me. And it was like back in high school, but it was like, huh. And it's like, yeah, when you think about how detailed a magic system can become, more, and then other stories is all about the detail in the world itself, right? But when you have fairy lore to go off of, I think it's really it's helpful to create a structure or to develop a very complex structure to your magic system. Whereas what is lacking sometimes, for me at least, when I read a fantasy book and it's like, here's some magic and then here's some other magic, and it's like, well, those two magic instances don't seem to be very consistent. In those cases, I'm always like, I'm bothered by that. I'm like, what? How can he just do it? It's like, he's supposed to be so powerful, but he can't stop this. And like, but when you have like a real world example coming from research you've done, I can imagine how detailed you can get and still maintain consistent, I guess, consistent powers or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I felt like I agree with you about the importance of the magic system. It has to make sense.
Yes.
You can't have a super powerful person or a super powerful entity in your story, and then they get failed by some simple thing like in some of the fairy lore. If you were to touch a fairy with iron, they would die. And I thought, well, that's probably a part I'm not going to incorporate because it doesn't make sense. If you're a super powerful being that you would be failed by this. If you have the ability to create, to be an alchemist, to create something out of nothing. So why would a little piece of iron hurt you? So, yeah, I agree with you on that. The importance of the magic system. And also, when I was writing this, in my research, I discovered that there was disagreement over what happens to a fairy when a fairy dies.
Interesting.
And is a fairy is it a spirit or is it a mortal being? And if it's a mortal being, how long does a fairy live? And I found like a lot of research on that, and the general consensus was that fairies they are mortal. They do live for only a certain period of time. And I found that really interesting. Just the idea that you could have a creature that is more powerful than a human being, and in some ways it's more it has more grace. It has a greater ability, and it's more fortunate in those ways than a human being, but it's still mortal. So I found that interesting.
I feel like you could play a lot with that. I think that's like,
Yeah.
especially in the sense that I think sometimes authors and filmmakers kind of play with this idea that what if we aren't the strongest beings in the universe that we think we are? I think, obviously as a race of a species, we think we're the strongest thing in the universe. And then,
Yeah.
and like that kind of plays with the idea, like, but what if we weren't? What I remember somebody who I think was a scientist who had said it, that was like, what if there are beings in the universe that look at us the way we look at like chimpanzees? We see them
Right.
as only
Exactly.
having the intelligence of a 4-year-old. What if we only have the intelligence of a preschooler to another species, right?
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
And actually, that's what's going on. In my book,
That's awesome.
that.
Wow,
Yeah.
nice.
There is some of that. It's like, okay, these are powerful beings. They live for longer than human beings. They're wiser. They're older and wiser, and more powerful, and more connected to nature.
Right.
And so when they look at human beings, they see these creatures that are, almost infantile, maybe even
Right.
cute, and might need to be protected, but at the same time can be a little bit annoying.
Wow.
I imagine one of the things consistent across different cultures about fairies is their strong connection to nature.
Yeah.
And I love that aspect of it, kind of like the way elves are as well. It's just that it kind of, there's a lot of, I think, useful parallels that you can use, or different things you can allude to by that relationship, that relationship, how we make assumptions about our relationship to nature, and how those assumptions can be found wrong, many times. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what we do nowadays, what we've traditionally considered to be progress,
Right.
is to separate ourselves from nature, or to gain control over nature.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And all the different ways that we do it. Like you could just drive down the street in a typical neighborhood and you see perfectly manicured lawns. I don't think a fairy would appreciate that.
So funny.
Yeah.
She'd love my lawn.
Oh gosh, our lawn is terrible.
You've gotten rid of all the native vegetation, and now you have a perfect lawn, and it's got these, little spiky blades of grass,
Right,
and
right.
every lawn is the same. There's no genetic diversity within the environment itself. I think that we've gotten really far away from nature, and I think this current generation realizes that, because they see things that are going on, like all the forest fires, and they're really starting to be concerned, like, what's going on here? What's causing all of this?
Yeah, it's really sad for me, because I actually remember in the 90s being in elementary school, and we would talk about what was going to happen. I've seen this a lot on social media about, especially here in California, like there was attempts to teach us at a young age that, this is California's coast is going to disappear in 50 years. And these species are probably not going to exist by the time, you're an adult, and the fires are going to happen. And then now this stuff is happening. And I remember as a kid thinking that, I was like, we're going to be the ones who fix it. And then we weren't. And so now, and I actually feel a lot of guilt about that for Gen Z, who's even more adamant that like we need to fix this. And I'm thinking, like, I remember thinking that too, and what have I done in my life as an individual to help push that? And I didn't. And now we're leaving like this terrible circumstance for these next generations coming in, and it's really awful. I'm really glad that go ahead.
Oh, I mean, it's just basic things like power lines. Whether one agrees with the concept of global warming or climate change or not, power lines through the forest that are old and not being maintained, it might catch on fire.
Right.
Maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah. It's just for, like, just from a like logical concept of like just maintaining things so they don't destroy whatever's around them. Like, yeah, but I'm glad to know that your book kind of addresses. I feel like generally if you're going to use fairies, something like fairies, it's got to connect to nature somehow. It's a good segue into that. Because, you know, I think of like Fern Gully when we were kids.
Gully. Classic.
It's like the ultimate like please take care of nature story.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
So let's talk about, so if I remember correctly, going into your teaching life, you were helping out or like working with students while you were in school. Is that correct? Like you were starting to work with students while you yourself were a college student?
Yeah. So my first teaching experience, actually my parents are retired educators, so wow. I used to have them in the classroom even when I was in middle school and high school. But when I got to UC Berkeley, I worked with the Freedom Schools, and so I did the whole the whole experience going to Alex Haley's farm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and coming back and working with students in Oakland. So that was like my first real teaching experience, having my own classroom. And then after college, I worked I did like PE. I was the PE teacher / literacy coach. And so I continued to do that. And so that was my first like foray into the teaching profession. And then I left it and went to law school. I did like a totally different career path because, you know, my parents were educators and I knew what it was like to be a teacher. And so I wanted to be different. Well, you know, I've already done that, seen that, done that. I want to do something different. So yeah, that's how I got into teaching and how I ended up doing something different.
So you went to, where did you go to law school again?
I went to Vanderbilt University.
All right.
In Nashville.
Commodores.
The Commodores, yes. Yeah, the Commodores.
Go Commodores.
Basketball team's not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad.
So what was your legal career like?
So my legal career was very really, really interesting. Really, you know, the stories that you collect as an attorney. and I was able to help a lot of people. I work primarily in immigration law. And so I have those stories of families that I was able to help to reunite.
Wow.
Helping a person to get their spouse to the U.S. where couples were separated, and I was able to help them either stay together or help the spouse get over here, and helping a family keep their mother in the U.S. and a lot of different, just a lot of that type of work, family, immigration.
What drew you to immigration?
But, you know, I always felt, I'd always been in favor of rights for immigrants. I always felt like the system is really broken. And so, you know, anytime somebody applies, let's say they apply for their parent to immigrate to the United States, and they have like a 20-year waiting
That's
period.
When my parents had a bunch of their relatives like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really ridiculous to have to wait like that, and so I felt like it was broken. But when I first moved to Seattle, my neighbor next door worked at the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. And I had just gotten my license, my law license. And so we had a neighborhood night out, you know, the national night out.
Oh, yeah.
And I met this neighbor at the night out, and we started talking, and she invited me to come and do some volunteer work. Like, hey, you know, you're new in town, and, you know, you should come check it out. We do good work, and we could use another lawyer. And so I started to volunteer there. And that's how I got into it. I realized, oh, this is something that I could do. And this is, you know, there's a need for my type of expertise. So, yeah, so then I just, you know, started. At first, I was just volunteering. And then the attorneys there started to say, well, you know what? We have a couple of clients and they need a lawyer, and you should really just go ahead and take on one of these cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So while you were in law school, did you do much with immigration, or were you doing other areas of law practice?
So no, when I was in law school, I basically just had my nose in a book trying to graduate.
Gotcha.
Trying to get out.
I got you.
I didn't really do any extracurriculars in law school. It was just all focused on let me pass, get my law degree. So, because it was no joke. Yeah, they make you study, and you're reading hundreds of pages a night in law school.
So you didn't get a chance to enjoy Nashville?
A little bit. A little bit.
It?
You know, I always felt bad. I never made it to the Bluebird Cafe. And I meant to get there. I just got too busy, but
you should start your book tour there.
Yeah, I had to stop by.
Hey, see? We're thinking about it. We're on it.
That would be very nice. But hey, I did get to sample the sweet potato pancakes at the Pancake Pantry.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And,
what about that Nashville
I got to hear a little bit of country. Went to the Ryman Auditorium. So,
okay,
you know.
all right. You get some of that Nashville hot chicken. What was it? They have that Nashville hot. Is it their original hot chicken wings over there?
Oh, you know what? I don't think I tried those.
All right, so we definitely gotta go. Okay.
But I definitely did do the biscuits and gravy.
Okay.
You can make a whole meal out of biscuits and gravy.
You really can.
I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm trying to get on your team. All right, I want to be your publicist. I'll be assistant to the agent or something like that, you know.
Oh, yeah. I can use that.
There you go.
I'm actually curious, why did you choose Vanderbilt as your law school?
Well, you know, I chose Vanderbilt because it was in Nashville.
Wow.
And I wanted to go to Nashville, and I was interested at the time in entertainment law. In the music industry. And so then I thought, well, I could go to a school like UCLA. Maybe I could go the LA route, or I could go the Nashville route. And since I had been in California my whole life, I said, let's go to Nashville.
Wow. Now, had you been to the East Coast at all prior to attending school?
I had been out there. Well, my brother was living in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, cool. I love Atlanta. Yeah.
And so I wasn't that far. I was maybe, I don't know, a 3-hour drive or something like that. Or maybe 4 hours. But yeah, I've been to Atlanta a bunch of times. And I had taken a trip out to DC one year. And drove all the way up to New York. So I had seen it, but I never spent quality time out there. But once I got to Nashville, though, and I was living in Nashville, it was different from Atlanta.
Yeah.
I had spent some time in Atlanta, and I was thinking I was going to be like Atlanta.
Oh, no.
But not really.
No.
Yeah.
Atlanta is such a different city. It was when I was stationed in Georgia a couple times. Every time I'd go, I was just like, just within the city. There's different, like you be on one side of the city, and it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like the other side of the city. It's such an interesting
True.
place. Yeah.
I like the
Yeah.
energy of Atlanta. It just feels like a place where there's so much opportunity to find. I don't know, just to find something going on, and but not like busy. Like New York is like, oh, there's something going on. It's super busy, but I feel like in Atlanta, like there's something really relaxing that I want to be a part of. That's over there. Like I feel like there's something really cool to be a part of over there.
Well, it's still the South, and so there's
Yes.
kind of like a slower pace to things. It's
Yes.
kind of like the ease of living.
Yes.
I was
A little
actually
bit.
just thinking that it's that southern way of just kind of taking it slow. It
Yeah.
definitely has
But there's
that.
still a lot of things to do though.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was I was always fascinated with the land. I loved it too. We used to go
Yeah.
visit when we were stationed out there together. It's such a great city. I just really loved it.
And Nashville, to me, the reason why I think of it as being pretty different from Atlanta is that Nashville doesn't feel as big as Atlanta, and at least to me, and it's a city that is so in love with music.
Mm-hmm.
It's so in love, and all kinds of music come out of Nashville, not just country, but you can hear some of the most amazing bands and singers just in any plain old bar that you
Wow.
walk into, plain old venue. People who are up at amateur night, who would just blow the roof off the
Yeah.
place.
When you think of a music city, I think Nashville is like the music city of America, the music capital of America, really, still.
Yeah, it really is. It's Music City, all right, and just the level of musicianship there
Do
is
you happen to be
incredible.
a musician as well?
Am I a musician?
Yeah. A little
Yes.
bit,
Well,
huh?
growing up, I played piano.
Oh,
Yeah,
very
I played
cool.
piano, and I sang a little bit. Not
Nice.
like trying to. I'm not saying I'm Roberta Flack or
All right.
anything, but
I understand you prepared a piece for tonight.
Oh yeah.
You need to warm up?
yeah,
Would you like?
no, that's not
Yeah.
going to be happening.
All right, that'll be in the next interview. Now we need to get together and
Yeah.
jam then, because I like to. I mess around a little bit. I was in a jazz band in high school. I played alto sax, and then ever since then, I just mess around with. We have a beautiful piano that was donated to us. It was given as a gift. So
That's
yeah, so
Yeah.
every now and then I'll mess around, like, because my son loves pop music, and he'll just be singing songs on the radio, and he's a very musical kid. So I'll be like, "Hey, you like that song?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "All right, let's learn it on the piano." And I'll just like, mess around and he just he thinks I'm the best, but I'm
That's cool.
terrible. But
He's-
it's so much fun though.
So Anthony's definitely one of those people that, because I think with his experience of the saxophone from high school, any instrument you put it in his hand and he'll fiddle with it till he figures it out. And it's like,
I'll be able to make chords or something out of
yeah,
it.
it's like every
You know-
instrument.
and that's enviable because like growing up playing piano, the learning curve on the piano is there is no learning curve when you first get started because you just put your hands on the keys and you press them down and they make sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But with a horn,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that simple to be able to get the sound out of a wind instrument. So I really respect that. And my character, my protagonist in my book, Will Da Silva, Secret Keeper, is a flutist.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that is right. I saw that.
Yeah.
I heard mention of not a flute, but of
A
a
piccolo. is it?
piccolo. Yeah.
Yes, he plays the
Yeah.
flute and the piccolo.
Ah.
So because I have mad respect.
The flute is
For-
so
for-
much harder than woodwind. A flute
I have
is
mad
so
respect
hard.
for people who can play wind instruments
Oh
in
my
general.
God. Oh
And
my
the
God.
piccolo is not an easy instrument. Actually.
I learned how to make the proper armature for a trumpet, a horn, but I can't to this day. I cannot get a flute to make a sound.
I actually played the flute for about a year, maybe 2 years when I was in middle school, and I absolutely hated it because my pinky. So the key you have to hit with your right pinky. My pinky used to get stuck in that position. Like I could stretch out all my other fingers, but my pinky would stay stuck, and it used to scare me. And I was like, I hate the flute. I was like, but I can make sound. I've learned a couple songs, but then I changed over to the saxophone, played that for maybe a year, and then I wasn't committed to anything. I'm not musical.
So did you grow up in a musical family?
Yeah, actually,
Cool.
my dad used to, well, he played drums,
Oh wow.
and I think he also played the trumpet for like 5 minutes when he was in school.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He played the drums, and he sings. He's a tenor.
Wow.
And I come from a lot of singers. All of us are sopranos. Like all of
Wow.
my aunts on my dad's side of the family are first sopranos, and my cousins are first soprano. We're all first sopranos.
Wow.
And on my mom's side of the family, my great grandmother and her father and siblings played in a band in
Wow.
Texas. They all played like fiddle and banjo and
In Texas. Where in Texas?
Huntsville, Texas.
I don't know that.
It's way out in the country.
Okay.
No, that's
Way
right.
out. Yeah. Like
There's another
Central
big.
to Eastern.
What's Texas big music city?
Austin.
Austin, yes. All my
Yeah.
buddies that ever end up who get stationed in Texas, they're like, "You gotta come to Austin. There's so much music."
Yeah. Austin would be the place to go, especially if you make it to South by Southwest
That's it.
when they
Yep.
start that festival up again.
Oh, yeah.
So do you ever visit your family out there in Texas?
Once in a while.
Hmm.
I don't get out there that often. It's a long flight.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
but I need to go.
No, it's cool though. You truly do have a musical family then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize, it didn't dawn on me until years later when I realized like my extended family is really musical.
Mm.
Yeah.
What about your brother? He's also a musician.
He's into music. He does his own like he does a little bit of DJ
Oh, cool.
type of work, and he likes to do sound mixing.
Mhm.
And he also dabbles on the piano. He took a couple of years of piano. I took a lot of piano, but we both are into music. He was more of like a play by ear
Mhm.
kind of jazzy
Mhm.
type of musician, and still is today.
Do you still find time to play? Do you get any opportunity for that?
It's harder. It's harder now to find the time, but I still play. I have a couple of pieces I'm working on. One is Eric Satie. Well, I don't want to hum it for you. I'm not gonna split your ears by humming it to you, but there's this one famous song by Eric Satie. I think it's Jim. I don't think I could pronounce it correctly. Jim. I can't. I'm not gonna try to say it. But there's one, and then I'm playing a little bit of Schumann. Getting more into some of those pieces. So that's what I'm working on.
Oh, that's good. So
Yeah.
you are teaching, playing piano,
Writing
writing books.
Teaching law.
Yeah. teaching law after school. Yeah, teaching legal classes, and once in a while I'll make something, like I'll make earrings, or I'll make a shirt or something. So I sew a little bit on the side too.
That's right. We've talked about that before. That's like one of your little hobbies, is to
Yeah.
craft and sew.
Yeah,
You-
once in a while, if I really have some downtime, I might make something.
It sounds like you're just a very creative individual. You have a lot of creative energy, it seems.
I guess so. I guess I do. I never really thought of it that way. I'm just always. I think you're right. I don't watch a whole lot of television. Um, I'm always like making something or trying to learn something, or like I'm always researching, or just staying busy, I guess. But I actually don't have very much downtime now that I think about it.
But it sounds like with your creativity, you're able to find, comfort and leisure as you do these types of activities, right? I mean, or I don't know, do you find it therapeutic at all to write, or is it difficult, something you kind of face, kind of have an adversarial relationship with? How
Oh,
what's that like?
it's completely therapeutic. Actually,
Ah,
kind of think of it, I'm always about to make something.
mm,
So I think you're right. When I do unwind, the way that I unwind is to create something.
that's so beautiful. Man, gotta think about it, because like, imagine, I mean, yeah, just in your leisure, you just are able to be productive at the same time. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, maybe there's a little bit of guilt in there too. If I'm not producing something, then I feel like
Ah.
I've wasted my time.
You got some Alexander Hamilton in you, I guess. You just
Oh, I
like you're
love Hamilton.
like you're running out of time. Oh my God! Don't go get us started on Hamilton.
Hamilton is our obsession.
I had the privilege of seeing not the original cast, but I did see it in New York the first time I saw it, and then Rosie and I went recently.
When one of the San Francisco tours, we got to go.
Yeah.
I was having to live through the soundtrack because it was actually, we were supposed to both go see the first time, but his sister-in-law bought the tickets for New York and she had meant to buy it for San Francisco. So I was teaching at the time. He was actually stay-at-home dad, and so I was like, just go to New York. One of his best friends is there, so he took his friend, and then he brought the soundtrack back. So for 3 years, I was just living through the soundtrack. I was just like, I've never seen it. And then he took last year, I think. It came back to San Francisco.
Yeah, last year we went. Actually, around this time.
Obsessed. My daughter's obsessed.
It was for our anniversary, yeah.
Yeah, it was for our anniversary.
Yeah. This time last year.
And our daughter got to see it when it came on Disney Plus this year. So she was super excited to be able to see it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Oh my
Absolutely
gosh,
brilliant.
Are you planning on writing a musical in the future?
I would love to be able to do that, but I don't write music, unfortunately. I'm not a songwriter.
Not yet.
You can.
Okay. Not yet.
Not yet. But yeah, that would be fun.
One of the first songs I learned to play for my son was Dear Theodosia on the piano. Not in its entirety, but I can play the little melody for that. Yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah, that's writing on a whole other level, to be able to not only write incredible dialogue and a story, something compelling, and make people feel something and be entertained, but also you wrote the music for it, the lyrics for it, and you figured out how they should be dancing and the numbers and all of that.
That's amazing.
There's this guy on YouTube who breaks down all of the Hamilton songs. Like, he breaks down the hip hop connections, the historical connections, the sounds, how they're symbolic of certain emotions. Like, he breaks down the whole. He'll go one song at a time, and I'm always fascinated because, like, just hearing it alone, I'm just like, this is amazing. But then I hear this guy, he's like, well, this beat represents this, and this was from when Biggie did this song, and this guy did that song, and then and then Hamilton, and I'm like, oh my God, the song's even more amazing than I thought.
Yeah, and it's rap too. It's not even just like creating R&B, or these other genres, but also rap and the syncopation. And for me, teaching history, I look at the historical accuracy of it.
Yes.
And the amount of research that went into creating a musical like that is just amazing, and the depth of it, and just taking that moment. I think one of the opening numbers where the three sisters are talking about being alive at that moment in time, and you just can't really give people that picture when you have them read it in a textbook.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
I
but
think what was so great about that, I think too, is there's obviously allusions in that song and in some of the other ones where it's like they're singing about how great it was for them to be in that time, but then there's definitely this message to the audience that you are also living in a great time, you know, and like it's just so perfect. It's like the artistry is just so, it's like, I know what you're doing right there. I know what
Yeah.
you're doing.
Yeah.
like the moment,
Mm-hmm.
the moment that you are in, and the sense of history that they felt that they were part of an important moment.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's relatable. You know that each generation that watches that show could feel that and sense their place in
Yeah.
history.
It becomes more relatable. I even think about that even in English. I remember in my college classes, we talked about the Renaissance poets, and there's this poem by Ben Jonson that I love that he wrote to his son when his son died and he was still a baby. And he wrote this sonnet to his son, and it's so heartfelt and heartbreaking. And one of the things we talked about was how generally when we think back to like people living in the Renaissance and Renaissance England, we don't think of like them being caring parents because there was, you know, the lifestyle was so different. The views on children were different. They were seen as like not as important as adults, and they were forced to work if you were poor, and you know. And so we talked about that too. Like that poem gave you a sense of relatability of being a parent, which you don't always see in Renaissance poetry. There's a lot about love, and sometimes there's things about politics, but to actually kind of get an inside look at the relationship a Renaissance English father had for the loss of a baby son, and especially for a man, right? Like during that time, misogyny was alive and well. But no, like this man had a very sensitive heart, and he lost his son, and he wrote this beautiful sonnet to his son. And like I feel like those little moments, like that's exactly what Hamilton just took that and, you know, magnified it. Like this isn't just some, like, it's real. It was a real story. They were real people. They really did have, you know, excitement going on for where they were in that time. They had love for each other. There's the whole Eliza and Alexander's relationship. You know, it's just so good. It was just so well done.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things I try to help students to visualize or imagine is how past generations had so much in common with us today. And so one of the things that I started doing this last year, having a Roman feast.
Ooh.
A Greco-Roman feast. Yeah, having a Roman feast.
That's so cool.
You know, old Roman style, you know, and serving the same dishes, the same meals that people would have eaten in ancient Rome. And it probably sounds super exotic, but really they ate basically the same things people eat today.
Yeah.
You know, not much has changed. The bread, the cheese, the olive oil, like everything's pretty much the same. And that's one of the things that stands out, I think, to the students the most. It's like, you know, oh, that looks good. That looks interesting. I eat that. I like that.
Yeah.
And they come to sense that society as relevant. It's still relevant, still current. Ancient people still had a lot in common with people today, and so they can start to get an appreciation, I think, for history when they're able to make those types of connections, personal connections to people who lived in the past.
I think that's so important too when we think about, and this is like a huge argument now with all the social justice, is that just because there's a generation that existed in the past and they did things a certain way, it didn't just, whatever they didn't just stop with them, right? Like they raised children and then they passed their heritage and beliefs to those children. And it's like, I feel like stuff like that kind of reminds, like we're connected to those people because we're all human. A lot of these cultures that we learn about in our American system are the ones who we have some origin roots in. So it's like we've carried those things over into where we are today. I think it should help. I hope it helps solidify that it's like we are connected to them. Like the reason we do the things we do, we see the world the way we see it, can go all the way back to thousands of years, to certain beliefs. And I do try to bring that up in my classes when we talk about, I bring this up all the time in the beginning of each class, that a lot of the works that we read are going to be really heavy in Christian symbolism, even if it doesn't seem like it will. And reminding my students that at the end of the day, no matter what your religious belief is, there was huge Christian influence when colonization happened here, and it dictated the laws, it dictated the social norms, and we haven't shaken that off. We still believe that there's a separation of church and state. Some of us do, at least. But then, like, at the end of the day, even those of us like who don't consider ourselves Christian, we still view the world through a Christian lens, and we have to kind of work through that in our own way. So when we look at the books, and sometimes there's some Christian elements in there, I usually have the students who do identify as Christian to explain them. And then, because just to remind them too, like, there are students that I have that are not Christian. I have a lot of Buddhist students. We do, because we work at the same school. Buddhist students, Muslim students, and they're just, a lot of times they're like, I have no idea what this reference is. And usually it's getting a student to be like, okay, who follows Christianity? And like, okay, do you know what this reference is? And actually what I've learned is a lot of them actually don't know what that reference is. So I'm like, well, I was raised Catholic. I don't identify as Catholic anymore, but I can explain it a little. And so, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing. It's like we have to look at our history and where we came from, and accept too that we've carried over a lot of things, and we're still carrying those things, and they don't just disappear. There's an overlap. When one generation is getting older, there's a younger one that's coming in, and we're still alive at the same time. And we're passing these beliefs and norms on to each other. So I love that. I love that you do that.
I feel like when I was a little kid and I would read fairy tales and, different, like the sort of the stories that were supposed to be created for kids. You read a little story, and at the end of the book it says, and they lived happily ever after. And I would read that last part, and I would always wonder. I was a kid, but I was still, I wonder, did they though?
Yeah. Nothing bad happened ever again? Really?
They never had another problem ever, because I know there's another part to this story. I know the story had to end, but how? Explain it to me. How they never had another issue ever. So yeah, that always seemed like an odd sentence to put at the end of a story, and they lived happily ever after, because the story doesn't end.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And going back to Gen Z, I think they know that now. They're like, no, we don't accept that.
Yeah, it just keeps going and going and going. As long as there's people on the planet, the story keeps going.
So let's talk now about what brought you back to teaching.
Yeah. Okay. So, I, in my previous teaching experience, before I went into law, my previous teaching experience was always elementary school. And I think I subbed a couple times. I think maybe once or twice at a high school. So I didn't really have much of a background in secondary school. And so my idea of teaching was little kids, was K through 5, or, kindergarten through 3rd. And I was like, well, I want to do something different. My mom taught kindergarten and 4th grade for years and years, and I already know what that's like. I think I want to do something else. So that was my idea of teaching. Oh, I already know teaching. I've taught, I've done that. But I didn't really know what it was like to teach secondary, middle school, and high school. And so when I got into the legal practice, and I've been doing that for several years, and I just basically got to the point where I started to burn out. I was working really, really long hours all the time, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And, you know, I got to the point where I wanted to see if I could really have more of a work-life balance and do something that was fun and creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of by accident ended up getting back into teaching, but at the secondary level. I decided, well, you know, I'll test this out, you know, and see if I, you know, enjoy this. I could do my law practice in the afternoon, and I'll just, you know, experiment. And I'll go into this high school, and they start at 7, and I'll be out at 2, and then I'll be working on my practice. And when I did that, I started working at a couple of different middle schools, and I was up in Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
I had never really done taught middle school before. And it just really was an incredible experience, a really wonderful, beautiful experience teaching at that level, because, you know, in a law practice, you know, you come into your office in the morning, and you got to work on something. You got served with some papers to go through, and put together your response, right?
Mm.
You go into your classroom at a middle school in the morning, and your kids are giving you flowers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just so different. It's so different. So it really was a beautiful experience, and I just loved it. And then I did a couple days where I was teaching music at the middle school level, and I got to conduct an orchestra, and I had never conducted an orchestra before, and it felt just incredible. I felt like I was flying. Seriously, it was like the most amazing thing to work with a group of musicians, to take this piece of music and to float it into the air, into realness.
Yeah. That's powerful.
It was just incredible.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? I think I need to go back to teaching. I was wrong about this.
Yeah.
What your parents say?
They're like, yep, we knew it.
We told you.
We knew it.
We told you.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
We've been waiting to hear from you.
Yeah, they knew it. They were like, yeah, you know, not at all surprised.
They seem really awesome.
Yeah, my dad had taught high school for years and years. So
what made you because it sounds like you could have taught music, you could have taught English and social studies. What made you choose social studies?
Social studies, because that is just an area where I know a lot. And I feel like that's more of my area of competence. And I studied it at UC Berkeley. I studied interdisciplinary studies, international relations, and foreign trade.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, and then plus I could teach government because, you know, I went to law school and I understand constitutional law. And so it just seemed like it was more of a fit.
Yeah.
And you were able to do a lot of different things it seems like, with social studies. It seems like you can take many different angles when teaching your students.
Yeah, well, with social studies, you know, there's different, there's world, there's American history, there's economics.
Yeah.
It's really a broad range of information that you can contribute to the, you know, with your own experience and knowledge in the classroom. Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, and I feel like having worked in social studies, being a lawyer is kind of like it's a way to work in social studies.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I felt like I actually had some experience being out there that I could bring to the classroom as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you eventually ended up coming back to California and teaching in Oakland, which is your hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Tell
Yes.
us about that.
Yes. Well, my family was still in California, and I was up in Washington State, and I wanted to do a program, but I realized that the best way I could do a program, the best way I could get a master's degree is if I came back to California, because I feel like the setup for getting a master's and credential in California is just really straightforward. And I feel like they make it so that you can do something like a district intern program, and so you can hit the ground running, start making an income, get real world experience, and get a master's as you are working towards your credential. So I just felt like California just had it going on with that. So I came back. I was like, you know what? This is a great setup, a great program.
What program did you get your credential in?
I went through Fortune School of Education in Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah.
But ended up teaching in Oakland for how long were you there?
So I was in Oakland for a year. Unfortunately, I started teaching at a charter school called American Indian Public High School.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And I loved it. I loved the school, the teaching those students, and I ended up getting an award by the end of the year. I got an award for like one of the best charter school teachers.
Love it.
In Oakland, and so it was great, and I would have stayed there, but honestly, it was so hard to find anywhere to live in Oakland.
Yeah.
It was so hard. I mean, even if there was just no inventory. Yeah. Even if I could have paid, $4,000 or $5,000 a month, I could not find an apartment. I just couldn't find anything.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, so I ended up having to leave. I would have stayed there and I would have continued to teach at that school. But yeah, I couldn't find anywhere to live in the city. So
I remember we talked about that because you had mentioned the school before, because we were hired together at our site, and I remember we had talked about it too, how you were. I could tell when I met you and we were talking about where you came from. I was like, oh man, she really misses that school. And I just think it's so unfortunate. Like, a lot of Bay Area teachers are having to go through that, of not being able to afford to live where they work and really wanting to work with the community that they serve. And it's just so unfortunate that
it's nearly impossible, except for instances like in San Francisco. I know there's like teacher co-ops where they're providing housing for teachers through the school district. And it's like, how else can you possibly, expect these people to afford to live in those types of area, in that type of market?
Yeah, I think the teacher co-op idea, maybe that's something that more cities might want to look into, because I literally could not find anywhere to live.
It's crazy.
And even if I could have afforded, to pay six figures, I couldn't find anything.
It's almost an expectation that you're going to commute 2 hours to get to school. Like, it's crazy.
I actually, my mom lives in San Jose. I have a lot of family in San Jose, and they were telling me a few years ago the mayor literally went on television, on the news, and was telling San Jose citizens, there's houses in the Central Valley that you can afford. Go find a house in the Central Valley and then you can commute. I was like, that guy did not say that. And they were like, the mayor of San Jose said that on the news to San Jose citizens. It's just so ridiculous to me.
It's out of control.
Oh my God.
That's about a 3-hour commute, by the way, if you take the train.
Yes.
So if you don't want to drive every day, then you're getting on Amtrak. So you'd have to get to the Amtrak station around 5 a.m.
In some
Oh my
cases,
God.
4:30 a.m. I know we have when they built the ACE train out here, so it comes all the way to Stockton and it stops through like Livermore, Manteca, and then I remember when it first got built because I went to San Jose State for my BA, and I used to take it to like come back to visit my family, and it was like 2 trains, and then now there's like 5 trains, and the earliest one I think leaves at like 4:30. So there's people leaving at 4:30 to go work in the Bay Area, and they're still transferring onto the BART or Amtrak or whatever because the ACE only goes to San Jose. It's crazy. It's just ridiculous. And if you drive, that's a nightmare. We talked about for a while. Anthony commuted because he had a job in Fremont for a while, and I was like, there's serious mental health problems coming from this commute because people just become super aggressive.
Yes,
they're so aggressive, and it's like this weird thing that happens to them, and it doesn't last in the commute. They're obviously bringing that home, and they're bringing it into their personal life, and it's just crazy to me. And it's crazy to me that mayors of these cities are just like, yeah, it's fine, just do that. It's like, who voted for you?
Oh my God.
What in the world?
How did you find Lincoln High?
Well, I just started applying to schools further out. My parents were moving from Oakland to Sacramento, the Sacramento area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I'll go out there because, I literally cannot find anywhere to live in Oakland. And, I could find somewhere to live in the Valley. So I started applying the positions in this area.
Awesome.
And that's how I ended up coming out to Lincoln.
And now you love it.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be able to have space and to be able to just kind of pull up to a place and find a place to park.
Yeah, true.
And not have a commute. I mean, all those things are great.
Do you see yourself here long term?
I think I do see myself here at least for a few more years. I
Cool.
don't have any plans to leave right away. And my family is in this area, and so it's a good situation. I think when you find a place where you're able to lay your head and take a deep breath and relax,
Right.
Yeah.
then consider hanging around for a little bit.
Yeah.
I like it.
Does your brother live here now? He's not in Atlanta anymore?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's also in the Valley.
Yeah.
So that's nice. I still have a little bit of wanderlust. I still want to travel. I could still see myself maybe down the road staying in a couple of other places, like cities I've been to, like New Orleans. I love New Orleans.
Mm.
I could totally see myself living there. I could totally see myself in the future living full time in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And I still go up there. I try to go up there every year and spend some quality time in the Pacific Northwest. And that's like my second home.
Yeah.
So I love it up there.
Have you tried Colorado yet?
Oh, what's that?
Have you tried Colorado yet?
I have, you know what? I've never been to Colorado.
It's pretty nice.
But
Put it on the
people
list.
say good things about
Put it on the
Colorado.
list.
I have to,
Put it on the book tour.
yes, I have to put it on my list.
Yes.
Yeah, I have been to Utah though. I've been to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's gorgeous out there. Utah is a beautiful state.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
cool
so if
thing,
Colorado's anything like Utah, then yeah, sure.
Mountains.
I like it.
That's
yeah.
it.
the cool thing I've heard, the rumor is that when you're as a teacher credentialed in California, that most states will just kind of grandfather you in. They're just like, oh, you got your credential in California, you're good. Like, and I think at the most they'll make you take a history class or something for their state. But then that's it. Like it's pretty transferable. So
Yeah.
another smart reason to have come back to get your credential here.
Yeah, that's yeah, the setup in California makes it a lot easier to transfer to other states. And yeah, taking the CSET in history was no joke.
Oh yeah, our CSETs. I think that's. It's actually funny how you're telling Anthony earlier, like it's not the LSAT, it's the bar, and I feel like for teachers, it's like it's not the CBEST, it's the CSET. Like,
Yeah,
like,
the CSET. And I did take a look at the English CSET, and I was like, yeah, English is not my thing. That's not going to be my jam.
And we have 4. How many does social studies have?
We had 3.
You have 3, yeah, because we have 4, and I actually, I passed all but one on the first try, and the one. So what happened was like, is that I was already feeling really anxious. I actually have anxiety disorder, so I get real anxious about things. And I went in and they were like, okay, I was going to take all 4 tests back to back. And they're like, if you need a break, like this is how you take your break. 'Cause there's like rules. And I was like, okay. And I had planned originally, I was like, I'm in between the test number 2 and 3. I'm going to take a break to go eat. And I got to test 3 and I was like, no, I'm just going to take it. I thought test 3 was going to be the there's 2 multiple choice tests and then there's 2 written tests. And one of the written tests is supposed to be like a short answer test. And then the other one's the essay test. In my mind, I thought that they'll save the essays for last. And that's not what they did. It was test 3. And I panicked. Because I was like, I have to write the essays already. I didn't take a break to go eat. I need to go to the bathroom when I'm going to. And it was too late. The test had started. And I ended up you're supposed to write 2 essays. And I only wrote 1 essay. And then the crazy part was, I think it's like you have to get like a 260 to pass or something like that. And I scored like a 242 on my 1 essay. So I was like, I literally could have just wrote an introduction for the second one and just got that little last leap over.
Yeah.
And I messed that up. So,
why would you need to have all 4 though?
That's the requirement for English. So you
had to finish it.
Yeah. So
you just did it another time, later test.
I ended up having to retake test 3. So but the thing is, for each content, it's different. Wow. So she only had to do 3 C-sets. I had to do 4 C-sets. Wow. Yeah. Multiple subjects, which are elementary school teachers, they have a whole other different set of C-sets they have to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was taking the C-set, the social science C-set was in 3 sections. And the first section, the world history one, I felt pretty good. I was fresh. I was coming in, all right, I'm ready to go. And I had a few naysayers around me, though, who were, they were saying, well, how many times have you taken this? I've taken it 5 times. Yeah, I'm not going to pass this time. Yeah, none of us are going to pass.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, people are like that.
I don't hear you, la, la, la. But I felt pretty good on the world history. And then the second part was the U.S. history. And, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to ask us a whole bunch of stuff about World War II, and I'm ready, and I know about the types of weapons, and, and they hit us with World War I.
Oh, mustard gas.
Okay.
Trench warfare, no.
All right, okay, so you want to talk about Franz Ferdinand?
Yeah.
All right. But
Black
I was still
shirts?
ready, but I was like, that was interesting. I was not expecting that. And
awesome.
And then I had my little break where, you get up, you stretch, and to get ready for the third one. And the third section was econ, the economics. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, when you have that as your final section, when you have to sit down and now you need to start doing some calculations and you're tired.
Oh my God.
And you can start making, careless errors. Oh, I think I had to go to the bathroom like 2 or 3 times just to, jump around and splash water on my face to stay awake.
Oh my gosh.
So that I could go in there and not make careless errors. And there were so many opportunities to make those little errors on the exam, little answer choices for just in case you forgot to carry or, you know, so
Did
yeah.
you pass them on the first try?
I did. I passed on the first try.
Excellent.
Because I went in the bathroom and I splashed water on my face and I did jumping jacks. I didn't care to look. And then I went back in and I just said to myself, look, you are going to pass this. You're going to power through this. And I know you're tired and you have to decide, are you going to pass this or are you going to fail this? Because you're prepared, you know the material. So you better pass this thing.
Yeah.
Like I kind of talked to myself that way. And then I just,
That's awesome.
I just did it. And I was like, okay, I put it all out there, but just in case I didn't pass, I'm going to study a little bit in case I have to take it again.
Yeah.
But then you passed.
But I passed, yeah.
And you lived happily ever after the end. We just did 1 hour and 36 minutes already. This is an amazing interview. You're an amazing person. I feel very honored to be able to sit down and talk to a real author, attorney, musician, composer.
Educator.
Educator. Hey.
Thank you.
Hey. Nice. I really look forward to the next time we get a chance to sit down and talk again. And like I said, I really want to be able to pick your brain because I think you have a lot of knowledge that will be helpful for me as I figure my own stuff out.
This is going into law.
Yeah, we'll see.
He's
We'll
on
see.
that journey.
Before we go, can I just tell people,
Yes.
if
Put
you're
it out
interested
there.
in
Yeah.
the book,
Go.
it's Wilda Silva, Secret Keeper. And you can go to wildasilva.com or wildasilva.myshopify.com and check it out.
Yep. And we'll have all that information on www.educatorsnotrobots.com if you want more information.
Support this educator, fairy scholar, pianist.
Thank you.
And author. All right.
Great to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to Educators Not Robots. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like our podcast, please subscribe on whatever platform you access your podcasts on and leave us a review. Whenever we get reviews, it helps boost visibility for our podcast and so we can draw in more listeners. Thanks again for your support, and we hope that you listen again soon.